I've seen George race from the junior formula, and I know that guy has got steeliness, that if he's under pressure and there's a title at play, I think he definitely has it in him to give it everything and come out on top. I don't think he'll necessarily play nicey-nicey with Kimi the whole way.
I think Lewis is back. I think this is everything that all the Ferrari fans were hoping for at the start of 25.
Do you think Lando Norris is relieved that he got the title wrapped up last year? Because it's looking unlikely in 26.
I would be very, very happy that I am walking around as a Formula One World Champion.
With these new regs and how creative you can be with your energy management and all the rest of it, are we going to see a completely different kind of race at Suzuka?
Welcome everyone to F1 Nation's preview of the Japanese Grand Prix. I'm Tom Clarkson, and joining me on the show are two F1 TV experts. Former F1 driver Jolyon Palmer and six-time IndyCar race winner James Hinchcliffe. Guys, great to have the band back together, particularly you, Hinch. We haven't had you on the show for a while. How are things?
Things are great. I've missed you guys. I've been following from afar, but excited to be back in it.
Now, Hinch, let's start with you. Thoughts on the opening two races of the season before we get on to Suzuka? What do you make of F1 2026?
Well, it's so funny, TC. We were chatting just before we started, and I'm firmly in the camp of no opinion yet. Two data points is not enough, I think, to make a strong conclusion. I'm just sitting back and observing at this point, and I'm reserving judgment for a little later.
JP, are you with Hinch on this?
Yeah, pretty much. I think we're seeing just very different racing, aren't we? That's the long and short of the first two weekends. Different circuits, different degrees of the racing, revolving around battery usage, battery deployment, and harvesting. There's a level of they've been good scraps. We've seen some brilliant fights. The Ferraris have given us a lot of entertainment in the first couple of weekends. It's obviously a new pecking order. There's a level of intrigue and excitement about it, but in terms of the overall picture of the regs, I do think we need more races. And I also feel the teams are still learning how to optimize this, and that's kind of giving us some amazing racing. The starts are still really varied. The race strategies, or in terms of the deployment, the actual race craft is really varied. It'll be interesting when things get a little bit more honed, if we get back to a sort of Formula One as we know it a little bit more.
What I do think is interesting is that the best drivers are still the ones getting the best lap times. So they're still able to shine with these new regs.
What's interesting is how the drivers are having to adapt so much as well. But it is still the best guys who you'd expect to be at the front in the teams, or is close between teammates that we'd expect to be close. But the lap time difference isn't massive compared to the offset between, let's say, a Gasly and a Colapinto, or an Alonso and a Stroll, or when we've had a difference over a marked period of time. That same difference seems to be there over the first couple of weekends. So it's not absolutely flipped the script. The way that the drivers are getting the lap time out of the cars there's a load of nuance and the detail of, the driving styles being different, the energy harvesting deployment being different. You go quickly through 2/3 of the lap, and then you find yourself slowing on the straights, or you nail it and you manage to put the lap together. Yet you are still getting those drivers that were previously very quick being very quick, which includes George Russell at the front. The Ferraris, obviously Lewis has sort of markedly stepped up, but he was very quick at the start last year as well. So, yeah, I think the pecking order seems to be the pecking order. I still think in it all, Saturdays are the most different, I think. Well, no, Sundays are very different as well. The racing is 120 overtakes. It's actually bonkers. It's so different. But in terms of just the pure cars, watching a qualifying and how the lap times come in qualifying is... Fred Vasseur described it to me in China as kind of counterintuitive to a lot of the ways that the drivers know how to drive, like carrying speed in, accelerating, smashing that brake pedal, braking as late as possible, turning it, getting on the gas and finding your way out. There are loads of nuances, but the drivers still have to find the peak of performance, and that hasn't changed. The requirement for driver skill is still there as much as ever.
And is greater with these regs than it was with DRS. I had a pathological loathing of DRS and have done since 2011. And I think the passes we're seeing, you have to be much more tactical than you ever were with DRS. Love it.
Yeah, that's the difference on Sunday, isn't it? And this is what the rules were kind of introduced to give us, which is the sort of yo-yo racing where someone makes a pass, but then they've got no battery, and then they're on the defense. So making the pass is no longer good enough. Kind of every pass now has to be twofold. First, can you overtake? Second, can you defend? Because if you can't defend and you can only attack, you're just always going to lose that place again. So the amount of times you see a driver making a pass and then just immediately looking right mirror, left mirror, right mirror, left mirror, trying to just cover off into the next corner, I don't think that's going to change with these regs, not for a very long time. So that, ostensibly, that's fun on a Sunday, seeing everyone really, really work for each position.
Right, let's throw it forward. This is our Japanese Grand Prix preview. Suzuka, one of the greatest racetracks in the world. Hinch, you went there last year for the first time. What sort of impression did the place make on you?
It's one of those tracks that you walk into and you see in person for the first time, and you just get this sort of overwhelming, flood of emotion because you've watched so many incredible Grand Prix, so many incredible onboard laps. And, as a driver, that's a bucket list racetrack, right? And so for me, it was so special to get to go there for the first time. Thanks to our colleague at F1 TV, George Crockham, and some interesting phone calls, I was able to steal a Porsche Cup car to go do a couple laps around the place. So I can say I've driven it. Still very envious that JP's done it in a Formula One car. The track, the atmosphere, the fans there are obviously something that people talk a lot about, and I think all the teams and drivers enjoy. So super memorable experience for me.
And JP, from an F1 car point of view, just what are the main challenges?
The challenge, they're just lit everywhere. The whole flow of the circuit there's nothing like it. That's why I think, if you ask any of the drivers, I'd reckon none of them have got Suzuka out of the top 5 in circuits on the year. It's just such a flowing track. I remember my first time I turned a wheel, you have no references for the whole first half of the lap. So normally when you come into any corner, it can be, most of them in China, in Melbourne, you've got brake marker boards, and there's 150, 150. I'm going to brake at 75 meters or 120 meters for a big stop maybe. In Suzuka, forget it. Everything is on feel. All of that first half through the S's, through Dunlop on the exit, and then you get to Degner. And it's just feeling the grip, feeling the speed, one corner into another, trying to find the rhythm through there. And, even then you've got the hairpin. That's not a classic corner. You're moving to the right, braking to the left, really easy to lock up. Spoon, 2 tricky double lefts. And then the one corner that is a bit more conventional is the chicane at the end of the lap, because you're coming in straight line braking, you have your marker boards and a reference, but you've done so much work around 5 kilometers that in your head at that point you're thinking, don't muck it up. Don't muck it up. I've had the perfect flow, and it's so easy to muck it up. Clout the curbs, brake too late, miss the exit. It's a wonderful track.
You mentioned flow, and I hear racing drivers the whole time talk about rhythm. Hinch, you only did a handful of laps in that Porsche, but can you relate to a lot of what JP's saying there?
For sure. I've done thousands in a video game or, in simulators at that place. And you certainly do get a sense of that rhythm. And it is one of those racetracks that has that beautiful cadence to it. It's funny. It almost reminds me in some ways from that feeling perspective of Laguna Seca in California. And, Laguna Seca is famous for the corkscrew, right? It's the 11-story drop or whatever it is from the top to the bottom. And I always said, I was like, the corkscrew, the most famous corner, maybe in North American motorsports, actually ruins the flow of that racetrack. Because everything else there it's long corners, it's fast, it's flowing, it's undulating, it's elevation, it's all these things. And all of a sudden you have to slam on the brakes and rip down the gears for this clunky left-right. The car feels all over the place as you lose all the grip as it falls over the hill. I feel like the chicane is sort of that in Suzuka, because it does have this incredible rhythm up until that point where you've got this clanky and you're over the curbs and you take a little bit too much and you've destroyed that great lap that you were talking about, JP. So it's, but yeah, the track itself, you can see it on TV. You can see it from an onboard. The rhythm to that place is just beautiful.
And you need the chicane for overtaking as well, because it's really difficult to pass around the rest of it. So I'm thinking for this year, that's going to be your key area. 130R into the chicane, and then that's going to be your attack, and then your defense probably again into the first corner. So it's still going to be your action zones. I also like TC, the fact that Hinch, every time he comes with us to F1 TV, he's either broadcasting from like the Paddock Club cocktail in hand, or he's managing to come to a legendary circuit and just get a couple of laps in a Porsche Super Cup to feel it out. So much Canadian charm.
It's a good gig,
Look,
JP. It's a good gig.
On the topic of anything you want to say, Hinch?
He nailed it.
Yourself?
He nailed it. No defense required.
No, look, let's talk more about the chicane then, if it's going to be a key area this coming weekend. Is it, no two chicanes are the same, but, is it similar to anything we have at Monza, for example? Do you have to treat it similarly?
I would say it's no, not the same as Monza. I think Monza, they're much more bespoke, big stamps. There's a bigger space between 1 and 2. And then it's a much quicker flow, just a flick through the second chicane at Monza. I'm trying to think of a circuit that does. You should have prepped me with this one, TC, because on the top of my head, I'm struggling to think. The track is really narrow as well, so it's not like Monza as well. It's really wide, much more expansive. In Suzuka, it's really difficult to go side by side through that chicane without someone being bundled off on either apex. I mean, you're never really going to get side by side to last all the way through that corner. Whereas Monza, you do get these tussles that go through. You've got a lot more space to give.
Let me throw a name at you. Montreal, anything similar there?
No. I think the Montreal ones, there is lower speeds. Again, they're lower speeds. The last chicane's obviously much quicker. So I still can't give you a comparison. Hinch, are you going to help me out here?
I'm doing the same racking of my brain that you are. I can't think of anything. I mean, I've not driven Monza, but Montreal is definitely different. There's a couple different chicanes in Montreal, but none of them they're sort of on either spectrum. Some are quicker, some are slower, further apart with the apex curves. Yeah, I can't think of one that's quite like that. Also, one that falls away on the exit as well, right? Because that's the other thing about Suzuka is the exit of the second chicane. It's quite difficult to get the power down, and you see the cars struggling there. Sometimes it's as it starts banking back to the right, they're still fighting it, and you can drop a left rear and get in trouble. Where a lot of the other chicanes I'm thinking of are a little bit more straightforward getting out of them.
That's going to be really brutal with these cars as well. With all of that torque kicking in as you're just getting on the gas. There's so many times you watch, especially at the start of qualifying, dirty track, difficult traction zones, and that is still a lot of cornering to do on the exit. I've got one for you, TC. I think it's a little bit like the old Hockenheim. Those long blasts, and then the sort of fiddly, I think it's the second chicane at the old Hockenheim, and then you're exiting, turning to the right, trying to get the power down, and then you've got another long run on the end of it. Hinch is looking perplexed.
Okay.
It's
old
tenuous,
Hockenheim.
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Old Hockenheim. So you're blasting out through the trees.
Right.
Big stop. Old sort of like quick 2 apexes of chicane. And then you've got that right-hander on the exit where you're trying to get the gas down and straighten it out. And it's because I think the circuit is probably the oldest school feel. Because you've got all these old circuits. You've got Monza, you've got Silverstone. Circuits that have been on the calendar since 1950. But Suzuka just has that different essence because it's narrow, it's so punishing. And so all the other ones, even Silverstone, is so wide. It's vast. It's had a few
even Spa,
reprofiles.
they've sort of changed in a way that doesn't have that same kind of old school vibe, right?
I think it's the track width.
Yeah.
I think the narrow circuit makes overtaking more sketchy as well because you just don't have a huge amount of wriggle room.
And there's no pavement runoff either, right?
No.
And the layout has barely changed since it was built in 1962. I mean, the 130R has been eased, but I'm struggling to think of any other major changes to Suzuka. And, hence I get you talk about the history of the place, JP. And, when you're driving it, that is the hallowed turf that Ayrton Senna was racing on and all the rest of them, right? Do you feel that as a driver?
Yeah, because I've watched Formula One since I was about 4 years old. And so all of these, I mean, Monaco's like the iconic one, But all of these circuits that haven't changed, and you turn up, and you don't race in the junior formula either. So you turn up and you're like, wow, this is what it's like. Senna and Prost into that final chicane. It was interesting when you talk about the circuit layout. So I spoke to Luke Browning on the way to Melbourne, and he was testing
Super crash
Formula
at 130R the other day.
Yeah,
didn't
he went over the barrier there at 130R. So it's still viciously punishing. And then I saw a video of a different crash, and I cannot remember who it was, I'm afraid. But they ended up over the barrier at 130R and basically pointing at the Degners. It got out the car by the Degners.
Yes, I remember that.
So it's a figure of 8 layout, and it never would have occurred to me as I'm coming down through 130R that if I get it wrong here, I could land at Degner 2. It's like halfway around the lap again. It's so unique like that.
This episode is sponsored by Indeed. You just realised your business needed to hire someone yesterday. So how do you find the right candidate fast? Easy. You use Indeed. Instead of your job post getting buried in a sea of listings, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you stand out and hire faster. Your listing jumps to the top of search results so the right candidates see it first. And it really works. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed get 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, there's no monthly subscription, no long-term contract. You only pay for results. One of the things I love about Indeed is how quick and efficient it is. Hiring can feel overwhelming, but with sponsored jobs, the process moves faster and you attract stronger candidates. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a £100 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/F1Nation. Just go to Indeed.com/F1Nation right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/F1Nation. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. What about the pecking order this coming weekend? Have we got any reason to believe it's going to be different at the front? Is it still going to be Mercedes followed by Ferrari? Can Ferrari be a bit closer?
I think everyone's closing up. This is going to be obviously not a sprint weekend. So I think having the 3 practices will allow teams a little bit more opportunities. Certainly a team like McLaren, possibly Red Bull. But McLaren, I feel like, need a little bit more time to understand the power unit and the deployment. So if you bring a qualifying so early in the weekend, I think they still are troubleshooting issues that Mercedes are on top of. So I think they'll close up. I feel like Ferrari are confident with their ability to close through the season. But I don't see any reason why Japan will be a more competitive showing for them than they've done so far. I still think if they qualify close and they can get to the lead at the start, then we'll see if they can outrace Mercedes. But I think in terms of pace, I think Mercedes will still be the benchmark.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? Because this is a track that is so infamous for being difficult to overtake, right? You just think back to last year's race. Max did Max things, and even though both McLarens were right on his gearbox the entire race, couldn't get anything done. With these new regs and how creative you can be with your energy management and all the rest of it, are we going to see a completely different kind of race at Suzuka? I'm quite anxious to see how that sort of plays out. But from a competitive order standpoint, it's not been a huge gap between China and Japan. I don't think that much work can be done in between, so there's no reason to think that it's not going to be Mercedes versus Ferrari. You know, the Oscar Piastri was even saying how at McLaren they're still so focused on trying to figure out the power unit and the deployment strategy. They haven't even touched the chassis yet. We haven't worked on the race car at all. We've been working exclusively on the power unit. Then you've got Red Bull, who's actually relatively happy with their power unit for a brand new thing, but he says the car's trying to kill him every lap. So I don't think a week off is enough time for those gaps to close. I think it is still going to be the same story up front. Now with the gap that we have to the next Grand Prix after Japan, very different story. We could see a lot of change by the time, we get to Miami. But I still think Mercedes has the edge. They understand the power unit, I think, better than anyone. And the car is good. They've done a great job with the chassis as well.
We talk about the lack of overtaking at Suzuka, but I felt last year's race said as much about Max as it did the racetrack being difficult to overtake on it. Max was just perfect. And, let's cast our minds back to some of the great races at Suzuka in the past. I think of 2005, Kimi Räikkönen qualified 17th and made his way through to win the Grand Prix. It can be done if the circumstances are right. So I'm hopeful that we'll see some racing this weekend. But can we delve, guys, a little bit deeper into what's going on at Mercedes? Antonelli's just won his first Grand Prix. There was such a great vibe in the paddock afterwards, wasn't there, JP? But do you think now he can put together a championship challenge against George, or do you think George still holds the advantage?
I think George holds the advantage, but I do think with time, I think Kimi will get closer to George as well. I feel like George has started with these cars with such a good understanding. Again, speaking to people in the paddock in China, and they were saying kind of what we opened with, really, that yes, Mercedes are quick. Yes, everyone's working out power units, but the thinking driver, the pecking order hasn't changed too much, and basically the thinking driver / George is really, really on top of the nuance of energy deployment. He's a really quick driver anyway. The last few years have shown his talent in any set of regs. But I do think he's really, really studied so hard, worked with the team in the factory. I think he realizes this is his best shot. And he's got a great understanding of all the tiny inputs that go in to give you a result. Kimi was really quick in Japan last year. I do think off the back of the confidence from China, I think, you know, if they can start together on the front row again, we've seen the starts being a little bit tricky for both Mercedes, and then the raceability of the cars, depending on what's happening with the Ferrari, being an area of randomness. And I do think that Kimi anyway can take the fight race on race. So I hope he can kick on from a first win.
Hinch, how do you think an intra-team battle at Mercedes would play out? Are we going to see sort of Rosberg and Hamilton part 2, or do you think the characters now are more benign than those two?
It's certainly more benign. I think it's more a Piastri-Norris, round 2 than any kind of fireworks that we saw from Rosberg and Hamilton. I'm a little bit more reserved still in what I think, what level of fight I think Kimi can bring to George. And that's as much a, that's much as much a compliment of where I think George is at right now. Last year was one of his best driving seasons, period. We always, kind of like you said, JP, we always highlighted him as one of those drivers with that extra bandwidth to manage a little bit more during a Grand Prix. And that was going to be a huge attribute and a huge strength for drivers in this new reg set. And I think that's absolutely played out. But on the Kimi side, he's still young. He's still going to make mistakes. You think back to Australia, massive shunt in P3, miracle. The car only qualified because Max caused a red flag, right? So without Max's red flag, Kimi starts last and doesn't finish on the podium. He makes it into qualifying, and because the car at that point is so much better, he's able to put it up front, and he races to a strong result. Fine. George was still the class of the field. You get to China, and he got the job done in qualifying, but his teammate didn't get in on his crack at it, right? If George doesn't have that issue in Q3, does Kimi start on pole? If George starts on pole, does Kimi win the race? I know it took George a second to get around, and Kimi did a great job. Once he was in front, he managed the gap, he had the pace, but George had to get through a couple of Ferraris to get there. There's a lot of caveats, to that weekend and to the season so far. This is not taking anything away from Kimi and the job that he's done, but comparing him to George Russell at this point and saying he's won a Grand Prix, Toto was right, the next coming. I think it's a bit premature for that. And I have not seen enough in 2 races. I don't think anybody's seen enough of 2026 to say whether or not he can give George an honest run for his money over a 22 race calendar now.
So I completely agree with that. I think it's very early, and I do think George still has the upper hand. I disagree with George not having that level of Rosberg Hamilton in him. I've seen George race from the junior formula, and I know that guy has got steeliness, that if he's under pressure and there's a title at play, I think he definitely has it in him to give it everything and come out on top. I don't think he'll necessarily play nicey-nicey with Kimi the whole way. So then it depends on what Kimi's like. And we haven't seen enough of that yet, have we?
So I agree with you on George. But it takes two to tango. And I don't think that Kimi at this stage, I don't think at 19, still in his second year, still very much under the microscope, I'd be shocked if he believes that he can jump up there. I don't even know if he has it in him as a human. He seems like the nicest kid. I haven't seen some of those things that you saw to George in the junior formula. But even if it's there, in the situation that he's in, trying to attack George Russell within the team, it seems a bit risky. I just don't think he's got it in him. I think those two are different personalities.
Is there a third driver in this? Let me explain. Remember last year, Max Verstappen being linked to Mercedes, took Mercedes ages to commit to George Russell for this season. Things aren't going so sweetly at Red Bull at the minute. Do you think Max might have been on the telephone to Toto Wolff already, talking about 2027? Does that then put pressure on George, maybe, and Kimi to perform? And could that sort of create tension? Could Max's sort of shadow create tension among the current Merc drivers?
It's a great point. It will. And the conversation is going to happen because Red Bull, we said this last year, but they will not win the title this year. And I was right in the end last year by 2 points.
Barely,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's genius. So they've got way too much work to do. And Max is not here to finish 8th in qualifying. He's not here to not even fight for a podium. He's going to be looking at a way to get into that Mercedes because they have the best car. They will, at the very least, be in the mix for being champions for the next couple of years as well. And if you're Toto, you got a chance to sign Max. You've got the threat of other teams closing in, so your built-in advantage at the start of this year is only going to get smaller. You can't ignore the fact that you got Max Verstappen calling, and we saw already those conversations happen last year, and there was a bit of tension. And even I think Austria, where to UTC in the press conference, George was like, "Well, hang on, why are we all talking that he'd replace me? I'm beating Kimi all the time, so he should be worried." So imagine there's the title looming and that in the background. I think that is a very good point.
What about Lewis? I mean, Hinch, JP and I have discussed it a bit, but your thoughts on what looks like a rejuvenated Lewis?
Yeah, I mean, you go all the way back to 22, and he never liked that car. He just never liked those regs. Something about the driving style, and, we all know how he likes to approach a corner and how that inherently was never going to work in that type of car, all these things. So the hope was always that with this new rule set, it was going to be a bit more of a traditional car and a bit more suited to his driving style, and I think we're seeing that. Add in the fact that Ferrari's done their homework. They've shown up with a strong power unit, with a strong chassis, and he's now going toe-to-toe with Charles Leclerc, who is, this is a guy that everyone has touted for the last 5 years as world champion material, and who systematically trounced him last year. Now they're neck and neck. So I think Lewis is back. I think this is everything that all the Ferrari fans were hoping for at the start of 25, and it could be the start of something great. It's great to see the smile on his face. I think that he also had some critical things to say after testing, and then he finishes on the podium, and all of a sudden it's the greatest era of Formula One. Lando after testing was like, it's not so bad. And then after the races, when McLaren's not doing so well, he's like, well, this is a joke. So I do think that the post-race comments and post-session comments are intrinsically related to results.
Never listen to racing drivers. Is that what you're telling me?
Long story short, don't listen to drivers.
Let's rewind it 12 months. He's at Ferrari. He wins the sprint in China. He has a big battle with, he takes the fight to Charles in the Grand Prix in China. They both get disqualified, but they're similar on pace. They go toe-to-toe in Melbourne, where they're both struggling for performance, and it's obviously the wet race and the chaos, but they're with each other. And then the season completely derailed for him. So if you take the sample size of 2 weekends, that is the one thing. I love seeing Happy Lewis. I love seeing the body language in the car and out the car. The Happy Lewis, great. In the car, you can tell he's happy because the way that he's driving and he's enjoying racing and, throwing moves when other people would maybe wave a white flag. And he's going, no, I'm going to pass you into turn 9. I'm going to be audacious. Brilliant. But I still think there's going to be a run of races when you think of Miami, when you think of Monaco, where Charles is lightning. some of these other circuits where it's shorter radius corners maybe, where we will see if Lewis is really back or if these are just a couple of circuits where he's more competitive. And Charles was saying in China, he hates this place. He's never been good. He's only out-qualified his teammate 2 out of 8 qualifyings, which includes Lewis, but also includes Carlos Sainz and Sebastian Vettel. So we'll see. That's just to temper it.
Now, McLaren, they have done fewer racing laps in 2026 than Aston Martin, who are in a world of pain. Do you think Lando Norris is relieved that he got the title wrapped up last year? Because it's looking unlikely in 26, isn't it?
I would be. I would be very, very happy that I am walking around as a Formula One world champion. It's everything we said last year, isn't it? Those two that hadn't won a title have their golden shot, and it was always going to be a really open season this year where they can't guarantee future success. So I think Lando's chuffed to be a champion. I still think he's got a positive outlook on life, even though McLaren are not where they want to be. But the other thing is, McLaren still have a confidence that they're going to turn this around. They still believe, when you look at where they've been in the last couple of years, I know last year they started really well, but the year before and before that, they have the best development rate of any team in Formula One in the last few years. They will do that again. They think, and I am confident in their ability to do the same. So it's things like not starting in China is a needless throwaway of points. But if they can pick up 5th places, maybe a podium here, they can stay in the hunt, much like Max last year. They're not miles away. And in a long season, maybe they will get closer.
Do you think there's Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri are still in the running for the World Championship?
After 2 races, I wouldn't rule them out. Obviously, it's going to seem ridiculous because they're carrying a big deficit. But like Hinch already said, Miami will be the first race where we can say yes or no, are they capable of turning it around? Because we've got the whole of April off. And if McLaren are going to add performance, trim a little bit of weight off their car as well, then we will see the first signs of that in Miami if they've got it in their locker. And that will already be in the pipeline for so many teams.
It's so interesting, isn't it? You've got the teams that are going to be relieved that there's a 5-week break in the calendar. The McLarens, the Aston Martins, the Cadillacs, all these teams that have, got work to do. Whereas if you're in a Mercedes, you want to keep the momentum going, and they will really not like the break.
I think you could count on less than one hand who would have liked to have keep racing. You've got Mercedes obviously want to keep that advantage. You've got Haas, who is outperforming where they should be and probably will be once everything settles down a little bit. I put Alpine in that same sort of category. Everybody else is so thankful that they've got a month off to go home, pour through 3 race weekends worth of data and try to make some improvements. Whereas, those 3 squads would have liked to just keep, padding their points haul while they had a little bit of an advantage. But look, that's why Miami's going to be so interesting, is how much does the competitive order change? How much do these gaps shrink or grow to different parts, up and down the grid? It's going to be very fascinating.
So take 2024 as a case study. Obviously, the original pecking order was closer than it is now. So there's bigger gaps for teams to make up. But Norris won in Miami, and that was his first Grand Prix win, and then he went on the potential challenge for the title. If you took away in that year the Bahrain Grand Prix and the Saudi Grand Prix, that would have massively hurt Red Bull because they had the performance advantage at the start of the year. So if you just take away those points, McLaren still would have had the same development. They would still win in Miami with an upgraded car. That's basically what Mercedes want to bank right now. They have the performance. There's no guarantee that they'll keep it. McLaren have the same power unit. In time, they will get, you'd have thought, the same performance out of it as Mercedes. Then it's just down to a straight fight of downforce and engineering, which we know McLaren are good at. And I also think Ferrari, we shouldn't rule them out, because the way that the 2 drivers are overwhelmingly positive about these regs. Look, I'm sure they're loving the fight. We're all loving watching them fight. It was brilliant to see lap after lap. It was sensational stuff. But I feel like they know that there's something in here that if you don't touch the cars, we've got performance coming. we've got some race wins in us, if not a championship fight as well.
What about Red Bull? Do you think they can turn it around in the way that you believe McLaren can?
Tough. It's such a big deficit right now, because I mean, to JP's point, when last year the competitive order was established quite early, McLaren was on top, Red Bull was next, but the gap was 3/10 a lap. It was 4/10 a lap, and on a really bad weekend. 3/10 was the kind of thing that Max Verstappen could make the difference in qualifying, and at a Suzuka or at an Imola could hang on to a race lead. I know he didn't qualify in pole in Imola. He got the lead and hung on to it. But it's a gap where a driver can maybe make the difference on a good day. Now it's a second and a half plus. Even Max can't overcome that, right? So with a new rule set, the development rate is going to be so much higher and so much faster. Let's wait to see what this first round of upgrades from teams really brings. I think that's going to give us a little bit of an indication as to who can maybe catch up and when. If the first swing at an upgrade is 0.6 of a second, okay, all right, maybe there's a fight here. But if we're chipping away a tenth or two every upgrade cycle, and it's going to take them 2 years to catch up.
And Red Bull's, 12 points from the opening 2 rounds? That's their lowest return since 2015. So it'll be interesting to see, isn't it, how Laurent Mekies leads the team out of this. Christian Horner, they've been here before with Christian Horner in charge. Horner loved a bit of jeopardy. He was a political animal. He was as good at slowing the opposition down as he was creating fast cars himself. I'm fascinated to see how Laurent negotiates the next 12 months, I must say.
I think the political animal part is interesting for this time, with a lot going on in the background, with various performance things, regulation talks. If you had a Christian Horner at full tilt trying to slow down Mercedes, you think that would carry some weight. And I don't think Laurent is that character. We saw it last year. He's a brilliant technical mind, but he's not the political negotiator that Christian was. I also think that he's got so much goodwill in the bank from the work that he's done so far. Red Bull knew that they weren't going to be challenging for a title, I think, this year. If they were, it would be even more of a miracle than Max's comeback last year.
Just one final thought on Max, Hinch. Something that Mark Webber said to me last year was, he said, this year, 2026, is a great time to be Max Verstappen's teammate. 2 reasons. One is it's the new rule set, so how's that going to play out? But also, if Red Bull are not competitive, we were sort of thinking more about the power unit. Is Max going to be up for the fight perhaps as much as if there was a championship at stake? So another good reason to be his teammate. Do you agree with Webber on that? Do you think we're looking at, is Verstappen 2026 a bit like where we were with Sebastian Vettel in 2014? Remember, Sebastian had won the title in 13. We get the new rule set come in 14. Daniel Ricciardo comes in. He's a young pup, immediately, almost finishes P2 in the Australian Grand Prix until he's disqualified. He's ahead of Seb. I'm not really comparing Max with Seb, but do you sympathise with the view, at least, that now is a good time to be Verstappen's teammate?
I definitely think it's better than the last 5 years, just in that, with the new rule set, there's a lot to learn, and it's a bit of a reset. Obviously, he had something figured out in that last generation of car. That said, how many times have we talked about how a driver with Max's capabilities and capacity could actually exceed and increase the gap to his teammate if he's able to manage the energy side of things better. So in some ways, yes, I agree with that side of it. I don't necessarily agree that Max is the kind of guy that loses motivation when he's not winning. I think he's happy to get out of the car and complain and speak his mind and be honest about how he feels about it. But I still feel like he's the same level of committed that he was when they were turning this team around, 12 months ago and mounting that championship battle late in the season. So I almost wonder if he's more motivated to get the thing better, and maybe it's bad. When a car's not handling well, that's usually when experience makes it a wider gap between teammates, right? We saw this a lot last year with Mercedes. When the Mercedes car was at a track and in conditions that it was hooked up, Kimi was right with George. When you had a weekend where they were really struggling with that car, that gap was a lot bigger. So in a year where it seems like the chassis more than anything is struggling, and Hadjar's done a great job over a single lap so far this year. Like, he's been fairly close to Max. But you wonder if it keeps being difficult, does Max's experience start to actually increase that gap?
I don't know if you can have a world, though, where Max is not enjoying driving the car, the Red Bull's not that competitive, and he's still the driving force behind the team. I know he's a super professional guy. I know he lives and breathes motor racing. He's still very much a Red Bull man. But the same conversation as, is he looking at Mercedes already? I think this year more than ever in his career, the drivers need to be 100% dialed in. They are spending more time in the factory than they ever have done. If you're Max, you're driving around 8th, you don't enjoy driving, are you spending the extra half an hour in the meetings? Are you going back to Milton Keynes in between to really knuckle down for trying to get back to a 6th place in Japan?
It's March now, right? We've got 20 races to go. I think that at this stage, 100%, if we have this conversation again, let's say after the summer break, and Max is still fighting for 7th and 8th, maybe then. But at this point, because development is so new, because those gains can be so big, I think he is because he's here for the rest of the year. He's got to do this 20 more times. And if he can put in effort now, that's going to make it more enjoyable when he can start fighting for podiums and wins. I 100% think he's committed to doing that. Again, if we're getting to Monza and they're nowhere closer, maybe then the motivation starts falling off. And, the other thing about 2026 is it's a contract year for a lot of drivers. We keep talking about Mercedes, but if Ferrari keeps putting things together the way they are and the way they have been, and they can be a genuine contender moving forward, I'm pretty sure there's contract, vacancies coming up at Ferrari as well. So there could be multiple options for Max depending on how it plays out.
Well, Hinch, that's a brilliant segue into the next team I wanted to talk about. They are P4 in the Constructors' World Championship, would you believe it? We're talking about Haas. And those points have come from Ollie Bearman, who is driving out of his skin. I want you guys to listen to this from Ayo Komatsu, who is my guest on this week's F1 Beyond the Grid podcast. I asked him how far he thinks Ollie can go in Formula One.
I haven't seen the limit yet.
Right.
So I'm really looking forward to this year. For somebody like him, every year he's been doing different formula, right? And compared to last year to this year, yes, it's both Formula One, but changes are so big. It's like might as well be a different championship, right?
Good point.
But it's not new to him. It's another new year, another new category. Here we go. So he's got huge potential.
Do you worry that you might lose him to Ferrari one day?
Yeah, it's no point worrying about it. I'm a strong believer in controlling what you can control, and then whether Ferrari's been investing in him for many years. So we got him, for last year and of course this year. So we got to focus on what we can control, and then if we've done great job with Ollie, and then Ollie performed so well that Ferrari really wants to take him the following year, we have to be happy that we've done our job, if you like. So you got to focus on your job.
Are there any deadlines in this year when you need to know from Ferrari what their plans are?
Yeah, but that'd be just a discussion between us and Ferrari. Sure. But seriously, I'm just we all are just focused on getting best performance out of the car and out of body. If that meant like we lost him for next year, hopefully not. But that's not something we can control.
Now, the full episode with Ayo is out this coming Wednesday. But guys, your thoughts. Hinch, why don't we start with you? The job that Bearman is doing at Haas this year.
Incredible. I mean, you really can't praise him enough. The second half of last year was super impressive. But, that's a young kid getting used to Formula One, getting used to the car, getting used to all these things, which, there were definitely some rookie mistakes early on, but really showed up in a big way in the second half of the year. You come into a new season with all these changes. again, does that inexperience hurt you? And you've got, Esteban across the garage, Grand Prix winner, been in the sport a decade. Is this the opportunity for him to kind of reassert himself? Instead, it's Ollie doubling down. No one's mastered these cars yet, but he has certainly done an incredible job getting on top of it, getting up to speed, understanding the concepts, having the bandwidth to manage things in the Grand Prix. He has scored at every opportunity that has been offered to the 22 drivers so far this season, and it's super impressive. And if you look at, we're 2 races into his second campaign, you look at what could happen over the course of this year, and then think back to Oscar Piastri and the jump that he made from year 2 to year 3. I completely agree with Ayo's assessment that I don't think we've seen anything close to the limit of Bearman. He's in that sweet spot of development where he can just kind of keep growing and keep getting better, and and the ceiling could be quite high for him.
JP, do you see him as Hamilton's heir at Ferrari?
Yeah. He's Hamilton's heir, isn't he? I don't know when that'll be. It'll depend how Lewis gets on this year. It could be for next year already. Do
you think he'd be ready next year?
Yeah. I think he is driving at such a high level in that car. He's getting the most out of almost every weekend now. If you actually look back to last year, he was in the points 5 of the last 7 races. That included 4th in Mexico when he went toe-to-toe with some of the top guys in a Haas. It included 6th in Brazil, which he thought was even better than his Mexico drive, in a clean fight, just absolutely wiping the midfield. And he's carried that in with a whole new set of regs, a whole new load of understanding, and he's shown he's adaptable. I think his raw talent is through the roof, and he's had to work really hard for these first 2 races as well. It's not like they've landed on a plate for him. He's had a bad start in Melbourne, had to charge through the field a little bit. And in China, the same. He had a agile spin, dropped back, got a little bit lucky with the safety car timing, but still had to outrace Pierre Gasly, had to come through his teammate and Colapinto, and then was holding back Max as well. For me, he's
you do.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's looking like the real deal at the moment.
And it's left Ocon on a bit of a sticky wicket, hasn't it?
That's the thing. It's making Ocon not look very good. It's making him look really ordinary. But you can't ignore the fact that Ocon is a race winner. And he's proven for a decade that he's a really good Formula One driver. It either shows that Ocon's losing performance, or Bearman is just that good that he's coming in and he is making him look really, really ordinary every week.
The midfield fight at Suzuka. Let's start with Racing Bulls because, Liam Lawson, it's a year since he was demoted from Red Bull after just 2 races. And hasn't he bounced back? Not least at China last weekend when he came home P7.
Yeah, you'd almost look at it and think that he might be quite pleased with where he's at a year down the road. Same powertrain, but they seem to be doing a really good job with it. We talked so much over the last regulation set about how Racing Bulls had this, or whatever it was called on the given year, had built this car. The philosophy behind the car was kind of forgiving. It was very good for drivers to jump into and get up to speed quickly and be competitive for the level of performance the car had fairly quickly. And it seems like they've managed to keep that sort of DNA in the new car. Both drivers have done a great job. Lindblad scoring, his first points in his first race, pretty impressive there as well. So Lawson's drive in China was fantastic, and they're doing a good job. And it's amazing how close that midfield battle is. You see some of these massive gaps up front, 3/10 between the Mercedes and then 6/10 back to Ferrari, McLaren, whatever. But it's a 10th or 2 between your Haas's, your Alpines, your Racing Bulls, your Red Bulls. It's a really good midfield fight right now.
JP, how much is Lawson benefiting from the absence of Helmut Marko this year?
I think all of them will be, maybe minus Max. But, I think he was a big presence that could be really hard on young drivers coming through, to the benefit of those that could thrive and become a world champion. But Liam obviously saw the brunt of that last year. But it did remind me as well, when you say that, the resilience that he's got. And I think you have to say he's a tough guy, Liam. We've seen it in his wheel-to-wheel battles. He's not afraid to flip the bird to whoever does him wrong in a Grand Prix, yeah. And also, it took him a while to get up to speed with Racing Bulls last year as well. It wasn't an instantaneous, right, here we go. But he got there. So he had some good drives. And the same thing in Melbourne. It would have been really easy for him to see, oh no, Liv Blood's here. He's getting all the credit from Australia. But he drove really well in China, getting points in the sprint and the Grand Prix. And it just will settle him down for the year as well.
Hinch, what about Williams? It's been a really tough start for them, hasn't it? The car is massively overweight. It's not easy to drive. Just your thoughts on the job that Carlos in particular did last time out in China to P9.
I mean, incredible, because as you say, there's been so much working against that team since the start of the new year, really. And you look at, what happened in Melbourne, how that weekend transpired for them, the fact that you went into a sprint race right after that, so you're having even less time to figure things out. That was one of those just sort of gritty drives that, was nicely rewarded. It does not take away from the fact that they are, outside of Aston, on the back foot worse than anyone. And I think one of the biggest shocks coming into the season, right? Just how early they dedicated and pivoted to the 26 program, and to be this far behind, already was a huge shock. I think given that, though, coming home with a couple points in the bag is a nice treat. That said, you had a lot of cars that didn't finish, a lot of cars that didn't start that race that would have been up in that mix as well. So I think that it's a smart enough group to know that, I don't want to say they didn't earn it on merit. You got to start the race to be in it, right? But as soon as some of those issues are taken care of in the competitive order, that's not where they are. And I think they're acutely aware of that.
Look, we've just discussed that the mental resilience of Liam Lawson. Hinch, what do you think Carlos Sainz is going through mentally at the minute? He had so many options at the end of 2024. He chose Williams because he believed in the 26 project. That is why he signed for Williams. How tough a moment? Do you think this is the toughest moment of Carlos Sainz's career?
I think it's a defining moment in a lot of ways because, he's got two options, right? He's got wallow in self-pity and play the woulda, coulda, shoulda game, or it's the buckle down and I'm going to prove that I made the right call. Because teams can turn around, and this was never a short-term program for him. I don't think, even with all the faith that everybody had in the vision and the future and the plan that James Vowles had at Williams, that he'd be fighting for a championship in 2026. I don't think that was ever the goal. And so more than anything now, I think he's got to dig in, buckle down, and help this team get to where he believes that they could be, and maximize the potential that he saw in them when he, signed on in the first place.
Right. A year ago, JP, what do you think Williams' objectives were for 2026? Even less than a year ago, right? After they'd got those couple of podiums. You say that they weren't going to challenge for the championship, but I think race wins would have been at the back of their mind for 26. Do you agree?
Well, they had to be basically getting towards the front group, didn't they? From where they were last year, where they could get a podium on a good day, hold off championship-winning cars, the only way, if you're putting that much resource into a new car, I think there's a level of knowing that they still didn't have the facilities of some of the big teams, but the aim had to be progress, which is to be in the fight with McLaren now, with Red Bull now, and try and fight for some podiums again, or even more. And they put so much more resource than even the top teams did into this car. They sacrificed so much last year. So that's why they're for me, the biggest disappointments, because they've got the tools. It's not like Aston Martin, who have been dealt a duff hand, I think, or maybe manufactured their own duff hand. But Williams have the tools with the Mercedes power unit, with the time to develop a car, and they've underdelivered. But to your point on Carlos and how much is he going to be regretting it, I think yes, right now, but it might well not matter, because when you look at the other teams that he could have gone to, so let's say Alpine or Audi, none of them are going to be hitting podiums in this season, apart from a chaos race. The gap between the midfield and the front is too big. If Carlos drives like he did in China and Williams can't progress to be on a par with those teams and back into the midfield, I'd be amazed if there's not a performance clause in his contract that says he can leave with this new set of regs in mind. I think he's a clever guy. I think he'll knuckle down. I think he's a top driver. And with all this talk about Ferrari contracts, various other contracts, driver movements at the end of the year, he's got to be in contention again. And he could walk into maybe Alpine, maybe Audi, and it might not make a massive difference. I think his stock has actually risen a lot, even since the Ferrari days, when you see him getting podiums for Williams and dragging a 9th place out of it. It was a sensational drive.
All right, final thoughts. Podium predictions, guys. Give me a 3, 2, 1. Who wants to go first?
Go on, Hinch.
Well, look, like I said, I think it's still a Mercedes battle. So I do see George winning the race. I'm gonna say, because again, it's a different kind of track in terms of energy management and all the rest of it. So I think their advantage holds. I think it's a Mercedes 1-2 again. I think Kimi's second, and then I gotta be honest. I think Lewis is. I really want to see Lewis continue the streak. I don't want it to be this 2-race data set that we had last year. I want to see the progress continue. So let's say George, Kimi, Lewis.
And Lewis loves Suzuka, doesn't he? He first, after FP1, go and have a word with him and see what he thinks about Suzuka. He waxes lyrical about it. JP, for you?
I will go George, Kimi, and then I'll go Charles. I will be fascinated to see more than anything this week how the Ferraris race. Mm-hmm. Will they have the shackles off to race each other, or will they be a little bit more disciplined to mount a lasting challenge against the Mercedes? It'll depend how the start goes and how their performance goes through the weekend. And I also think Charles was loved the fight, was happy to be 4th last time out. I don't know if he'll be so happy to finish 4th if Lewis is 3rd again and they're on the receiving end. So I'll say Charles manages to bounce back. What do you reckon, TC?
Well, we're all in agreement. It's Mercedes versus Ferrari again. Not a big enough gap to make any difference to the pecking order at the front. I think it's George, Kimi, Lewis. There you go. Well,
Can't wait for us all to be wrong in a week's time.
Guys, thank you both very much for your time. It's always great to chat. In selected countries, you at home can watch all the action at Suzuka on F1 TV. In the US, you can watch on Apple TV. And you can also keep across the latest news at F1.com, the official F1 app, and at F1 on social media. And don't forget to check out F1 Beyond the Grid with Ayo Komatsu on Wednesday, as we quoted him earlier. And the latest episode of F1 Explains is all about the F1 paddock, featuring David Coulthard. That's just below this show on the F1 Nation feed. Thank you very much for listening, and we will be back next Monday with our review of the Japanese Grand Prix. Will it be George, from Kimi, from Lewis? F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.